Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Too Deep NFL podcast. With us as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, SumerSports.com. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City, 810WHB.com, where you can hear my radio show 2 to 6 Central Time. And, of course, we want to welcome our fine sponsor as our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Coming on board, all your parking needs can be covered with one set of people, the folks at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. If you need anything, whether it's a repair to your current parking lot, an expansion, building a brand new parking lot, asphalt, concrete, they do it all. Everything, striping, paving, they can handle any one of your parking lot needs. If you have a business and that parking lot ain't what it needs to be, let the experts at Gann Asphalt and Concrete bring it up to speed. Kansas City's best is there for you. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. We have a lot to get to today here in the program as full board of topics. We'll start out talking about the Buffalo Bills. They've now dropped a couple in a row. Are we still believing in the Buffalo Bills? Bruce Arians is calling out Tom Brady. Vikings, is Eric Eager going to have to swallow hard and admit that the Minnesota Vikings are one of the top three teams in the NFL? Did the Eagles get exposed on Monday Night Football? Is anybody going to get in on? I don't know. Probably not. Dallas's defense, is it overrated? Miami's offense, has it now become at least the NFL's scariest or even the best? Jeff, Saturday's first game happened. Shut a lot of people up. Should it have? Josh McDaniels lost that game. Is he in trouble? Should he be in trouble? We'll talk about that. Another bad week for the refs. And what are you looking for in week 11? Jeff, let's get it started. Buffalo Bills have dropped 2 in a row. They seem to have a close game problem. Josh Allen self-destructing late in this game. If he could get a snap off, maybe we're not talking about this, but should we be talking about it? The Bills been a little bit exposed. Are you still buying them overall?
Yeah, I'm still buying, but yeah, they have been exposed. They certainly have some issues that were there before the Chiefs game. A few weeks back, they were, I think, 6 straight losses they'd had in one-score games before that win, and now you're going back to, again, you're having a couple more losses after this that are one-score games, and it's look, I mean, they were projected to be the champions this year for a reason. A ton of talent. Josh Allen is an amazingly skilled quarterback, but when you have those moments, and again, that game the other night, when you're talking about an interception when it's 27-17 on a 4th and 2 play in the red zone, that fumble where all you have to do, it's a very difficult situation there, snapping the football in that situation at the goal line, knowing people are coming after your center, but take the football, get a half yard, do it again, game's over. And then certainly the last pass he threw was just as bad of an interception as you can throw in that situation, throwing into traffic, hitching, all the things you don't want a quarterback to do. Yeah, I do think he's trying too hard. I do think they're feeling some of the weight of the expectations right now that comes with what they're trying to accomplish. But one reason I do have still faith in them to be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish is that I look at where the Rams were last year. And I was in Green Bay when they'd lost their third straight game in the second half of the season, and they were in disarray. I remember Jalen Ramsey talking about, if this team wants to be something, we got to figure it out. I remember the Bucs being 7-5 2 years ago, and Tom Brady's offense just being, dog crap, and people wondering if they were going to make the playoffs. And I remember the Chiefs being 6-4 in 2019. And so I think every champion, if you want to win a Lombardi trophy, you're going to have a moment of truth, and you're going to have to figure out if you actually can do it. This is that time for the Bills. So I think they have the talent to make it happen. The question now moving forward is whether they can actually show that resolve and make it happen.
Yeah, that is the big one. Eric, where do you sit on the Buffalo Bills? You have to back up the bus at least a little bit, but how far do you back it up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar to where the discussion for the Kansas City Chiefs last year was, right? Where you can't ignore the fact that they're losing games. The games that they're losing, when they lost to the Miami Dolphins, they outperformed the Dolphins like 2-1 on offense, right? And then they lose that game, but it counts. The Jets game, the Jets are a very good defense, but the Bills kind of outperformed them in that game. They lost. the Vikings game, quintessential, like if they can get a yard out of their own end zone, they win that game, and they lost. So I think, if you run it back, it's reasonable that they could be, they're 6-3 now, like let's say 7-2, 8-1. So I don't think that they're bad. I just think that it's very clear why, as Jeff said, even when you're the favorite to win the Super Bowl, you're still only like 8-1, 5-1 to win the Super Bowl, which is an implied probability like 15 to 20%, right? Because that, there's 85 to 80% of the rest of the league that can get you, even if you're the favorite. And we're seeing that issue with Buffalo right now.
Yeah, I would say that, listen, I still think the Bills are the one team. Yeah, I mean, along with Patrick Mahomes, right? Maybe I won't even give credit to the whole Chiefs team and just put it on the fact that I don't know that anybody wants to see Patrick Mahomes like he is the boogeyman for teams that are out there, because he just won't die in any game, it seems like. But I still think top to bottom, nothing has changed with the Buffalo Bills roster. I think what has been exposed. I am still very bullish. I have them as the number 2 team in the NFL right now, behind the Chiefs, and I very easily in a week or 2 weeks can put them right back at number 1, even if the Chiefs continue to hold that number 1 seed, because I do think it's the best roster, and I think Josh Allen is maybe the one guy in the NFL. Maybe Aaron Rodgers can dig down deep and can still go find it and play at a level opposite Patrick Mahomes. But we've seen Josh Allen last year in a playoff game, right? Not in just some third quarter that didn't mean squat. We've seen him, go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes. And so he can play at that level. Apparently there's a bad Josh Allen, too, that will make some mistakes, force the ball, and maybe he can throw you out of the game. So I think we've learned that Josh Allen isn't Patrick Mahomes. The debates of are they equal as Josh Allen passed him, I think that answer is no. But the Buffalo Bills football team are still salty as hell. And I don't think anybody wants to face them. And I'm with you guys. Like, I still really like them. I think they will find themselves. I think the lower they get in the standings, the more dangerous they are, because people may start to take them for granted. I mean, obviously not falling clear out of the playoffs, which that division is so good that could happen, although I expect the Jets to have a regression back to the mean. But, yeah, I think this may be the best thing to happen for the Buffalo Bills. Take them out of that bullseye position, right? That's what we talked about earlier on. And we said when they beat the Chiefs, okay, now the bullseye's on their back, because the Chiefs are not the defending champion. The last 2 champions are over on the NFC side, even though everybody feels like, and rightfully so, the AFC is better. The bullseye's on the Bills. They're the team to beat. It was kind of there before the season started, and when they beat the Chiefs, it was officially them. Could they carry that pressure? And they beat the Chiefs last year, and they couldn't carry that pressure. This year, it seemed like a different team that had resolve and was focused. And as they walked off the field against Kansas City, there was no celebration. And so you thought, okay, they've matured. They're ready for it. And I felt like 15-2, 14-3 was coming. And they could still get to 14-3. They got to win them all the rest of the way. But I think what we've seen is they're good enough to win it all. But I don't know that they can ever, at least this incarnation of, even with all the talent they have, be a heavy favorite, like I think a lot of us thought they were. Jeff, can we say that they've packed up to the pack?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair. And I agree with you. I think it's important for them to understand that, because I think some of the way they played, and I said this on our podcast the other day, is they play as if they're just going to win. Sooner or later, it's just going to happen. And I think when you become that kind of team, you put yourself in a very dangerous spot. And I remember last year, they got beat by New England in that crazy win game, and New England ran the ball like 57 times and threw it 3 times. And they were getting called out at their own press conferences by their own reporters about being embarrassed and humiliated. And Josh Allen started playing at a really high level after that. And I think the last 3 games he played in the NFL season, including the playoff game against the Chiefs, I mean, he didn't throw an interception. He threw 11 touchdown passes. He was locked in. And I think it would not surprise me if they got to that place again and he got to that place, because, again, I go back to that 2019 season with the Chiefs, because we're in Kansas City, for the people who don't know that. And I remember specifically them playing the Patriots in New England, and Patrick Mahomes got picked off on a crossing route. And it was one of those games where it was just like New England was their boogeyman. And they just knew, okay, we have to beat this team. We cannot keep losing to this team. And I visibly remember Patrick Mahomes on the sideline, pulling people together and basically saying, we're not losing this game. I don't know exactly how he put it, but that was the message that he put out there. And they never lost again. And I think those moments happen in every season. It's very hard in the NFL to sustain the kind of pace and energy and urgency the Bills started this year with. You just cannot go through a whole year that way. But I think you have to reinvent yourself and evolve. And I think that's what they're going to have to do now.
Yeah. Eric, is it Josh Allen that got exposed? Is it as simple as that the rest of the team is the team, but the quarterback just didn't make the play when he had to make the play at the end of the game?
Kind of. I mean, I think, I've been somebody who, part of my shtick over the last year and a half has been to be hey, my favorite team's the Chiefs, but the Bills are better than they are. And, hope like hell that they win in the playoffs. And I think the other part of it is Josh Allen is in that 1A category with Mahomes. And I think that's a little too generous to Allen. I think Allen's a step below Mahomes. Now, we saw it last year. It was the first time in his career that Mahomes had a slump. Allen, this is he's had some slumpy times, even in 2020 where he had really good numbers. The middle of the season, he took some sacks. He threw some interceptions. Last year, his passer rating went down 15 points from 2020. And part of that was, road games had no fans in 2020 and so forth. But we've seen, Allen's just a step below Mahomes. And I think in Kansas City, for example, as Jess said, we're all based more or less is you have to cherish the fact that Mahomes doesn't have these oscillatory events in his career. But guys like Allen, even though I think he's the second best player in the whole league, you're going to get some downturns that are going to be, and they come in bunches, as we've seen. These interceptions have come in a bunch here.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things. One here, I thought this was interesting where it was Nicholas said, does Buffalo need another wide receiver? It seems like they haven't gotten production that they need after Diggs. And then down here, Mizzou said, weird as it sounds, I don't think Buffalo's able to consistently produce offensively. Gabe Davis is not a true number two. They missed the production from COVID Beasley. Nice play on words there. Gabe Davis, I do think, he's kind of the Alvin Harper of the Bills, right? If they're going to go on to win the championship, Alvin Harper would come close to 1,000 yards for the Cowboys. Michael Irvin was the guy that was there whenever you needed to move the chains. He was kind of the, Travis Kelce-esque, but he was out at the wideout. He did everything, big catches, contested catches. Alvin Harper would run these deep routes, catch the big plays, and he would put some teams away. And we've seen Gabe Davis do that. He nearly put the Chiefs away in the divisional game last year, but he is not seemingly –
he's John Taylor to Jerry Rice.
And he's kind of, Marquez Valdez-Scantling might be diet Gabe Davis, right? Can make those big plays. And when they do, it's a godsend and it really helps put you over the top. But if you're we got to ride or die here, you ain't riding and dying. You're going to die. You're not going to ride if you're rolling all Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Gabe Davis kind of feels the same way. I do think that's kind of interesting, but so none of us, we're all still very confident that Buffalo Bills are going to be in the playoffs and they're going to be a major threat. And I still think it's them and the Chiefs. And I don't think any of us disagree. Are they still 1-2? Some order, Chiefs, Bills?
Yeah. Look, I think the Dolphins are going to be dangerous with what they have on offense. I think the Bengals will be dangerous when Jamar Chase gets back, and I think the Ravens will be dangerous as we figure out what they have on defense, because with that, even though they don't have a great pass rush, a four-man pass rush, they have a lot of versatility within their defense that can allow them to do some things that Bill Belichick used to do back in the day to Patrick Mahomes and to guys like Josh Allen. So I could see them having the personnel to make it interesting and the playmaker at quarterback. But yeah, I don't think there's any question that the Bills and the Chiefs are the front runners.
All right, let's talk a little bit about then the NFC side. Did the Minnesota Vikings, Eric, don't vomit in your mouth. I know you have a love-hate relationship with Vikings fans. Did the Minnesota Vikings move their way up? We'll talk about the Eagles in a second. Are they the NFL's third best team? Now, have they ascended beyond the Philadelphia Eagles as the NFC's best?
Look, that was, as somebody who grew up watching the Vikings, that was one of the best regular season games that they've ever played on Sunday. And I know, like, Kirk, had a rough first half, but he was amazing in the second half. That was that was a signature and a very good win for the Minnesota Vikings. Be that as it may, they are underdogs at home to Dallas this week. So if I respect the market, so like part of me, I think that I think that you can make a very good case that they're the third best team in the league, but I think the market doesn't believe that's the case. So I put them in the top 5.
Okay. Jeff, the Vikings, they seem to be, they're playing very well. We mentioned the bullseye on the back of the Buffalo Bills. It has not been there for the Minnesota Vikings. They're going to get at least a dot, if not the 2 rings around it. They're going to be much more, notable now. People are going to start taking or having to take them seriously. How bullish are you on the Vikings right now?
They're top 3 to me. I mean, I don't know. I just talked about how much I like Buffalo, but I couldn't put Buffalo in the top 3 of the teams in the league right now. I would take the Chiefs, I would take the Eagles, and I would take the Vikings, largely because the Vikings beat the Bills in Buffalo down 17, and they've also only had one other loss. They've only had one loss, and that's to Philadelphia. And so at some point, I know it's almost like, and I understand Eric's pain. I think growing up watching the Lions, you never want to really think your team is doing great, even when they are doing great. But who else you picking? I mean, they've got. What? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like again, and I look, I'm friends with Kwesi. I'm really happy.
The general manager, by the way, when you drop
and
in.
I'm rooting for his approach to work. Right. Like I'm rooting for his approach to work. A team that blows a 3-score lead to the Bears, who can't throw the football at home, right? A team that's down 10 to Taylor Heineke and the Washington Commanders just a week before they beat Buffalo. A team that is down 14 to the Detroit Lions at home in week 3, gets blown out by the if you take and you can't do this, but if you take away, like let's say the Bills sneak the ball from their 1 and they beat the Vikings by 4, and we're like, that was a good effort by the Vikings, but it makes sense in conjunction with barely beating Washington. I mean, this team's below 500 against the spread, right, at 8-1. Like they're still not like meeting market expectations. That's my thing. Is like we tried it. Like it's sort of like this part of like, do we throw the Colts game out of the Chiefs analysis?
I think I actually heard you and George have a debate about this like a year ago about we're much more forgiving of the top teams. We just poo-poo away when they lose to a bad team. And
right.
We're like, no, this is who they really are. But the bad teams, when they, rise up and get a win, we're like, no. That the other team lost it.
So what I'll say is I think I think the Vikings remind me of last year's Rams for all the good reasons and the bad reasons. I think the Vikings have really high-end talent in Jefferson, Zadarius Smith, Donnell Hunter, Harrison Smith, Patrick Peterson, Christian Darrisaw. I think they're staying healthy the same way that those Rams teams did. And it's funny that O'Connell brought some of the sports science people over. I think they have some of the ingredients to be like last year's Rams. I think if you run back last season a million times, the Rams don't win the Super Bowl very much, but they at least won it the one we live in. I think the Vikings, the Bills game is the same way as the Chiefs game is with the Colts. The Colts game tells you the Chiefs are capable of losing to a bad team. I think the Vikings against the Bills tells you the Vikings are capable of beating a great team.
Let's the elephant in the room. Kirk Cousins is the elephant in the room. Let's be clear, and I think it's why and hopefully, like to Jeff's point, this will fuel, if you're a Bills fan, will fuel Josh Allen. Kirk Cousins is 20th in QBR and 20th in passer rating. That's not hoisting the Lombardi Trophy, right? It's just not.
Yeah.
You can count on that, right? Like at the end of the day, Kirk Cousins isn't good enough. He had 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions in this big win over the Buffalo Bills. They won in spite of him. It's just that bad Josh Allen showed up and played down to his level. The team around him's pretty good, but the general manager is going to find out how hard it is to win without an elite quarterback, isn't he, Jeff?
Yeah. Look, I actually am not that hard on Kirk Cousins because they've got 5 fourth-quarter comebacks or five wins when they've been trailing by at least by 2.5 minutes with 2.5 minutes left in the game. So with 3 minutes left in the game, they've been down 5 times.
Who are the
and found a
opponents?
way to win. The Vikings.
No. Who are their opponents in those games?
Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter. That's still a pretty impressive feat.
Because I was looking at it, the one score wins. To Eric's point about the spread, after thumping the Packers to open, then getting thumped by the Eagles, a 1-score win to a 4-point win against a bad Lions team at home, by the way, a 3-point win to a bad Saints team at home, by the way, a 1-score win over the Bears at home. They did beat the Dolphins. That's really their.
And the Dolphins started EMAW, Spencer Thompson, every man a Wildcat.
Skylar Thompson. I was at quarterback, so good footnote there. I'd forgotten about that part of it. Cardinals, they won 1 score again, 8 points. And the Commanders, they beat by 3 points. And as Eric said, I mean, the comebacks, now they've come back on the Bills. That's real, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's the most compelling argument.
Yeah, but ultimately, if this was last year or 2 years ago, I would buy what you guys are saying. But if you look around the NFL, it's a lot of mediocrity. And so when you're 8-1 in a year like this, that to me shows you that you're a really good team. And we could play the game. Look at the Chiefs. The Chiefs not only lost to the Colts, down 17-0 to the Raiders, right? That happened. Down in the fourth quarter by 17-9 to the Titans with a backup quarterback who couldn't throw a pass. I mean, these things happen. But I just don't think that if you look around the NFL and look at especially in the NFC, you're not going to find anybody else playing at a higher level outside of Philadelphia. And within the NFL itself, you're going to find a couple teams playing at an equally high or higher level. And so just by process of elimination, they got to be in the top 3, at least top 4.
But Jeff, doesn't that mean though, like, I agree with what you're saying in principle, but like, would you rather be an 8-1 team in like the 2020 season, like in the AFC, like the Chiefs were, where the Bills are good, the Ravens are good, the Steelers are good, the Browns are good, all that kind of stuff? Or would you rather be, because I feel like if you're 8-1 in large part because the rest of the conference stinks, right? And like the Vikes have gotten to play backup quarterbacks in Andy Dalton, Skylar Thompson, Teddy Bridgewater as well. They got to play Taylor Heineke, and so like they've gotten to. My thought is, okay, if this team's going to win the Super Bowl, would you rather have been more battle tested to get to 8-1, or would you rather say, well, everybody in the playoffs stinks? Like, that's because the argument you're making is when they get to the NFC playoffs, they're going to have a huge edge because they're going to be a 1 or 2 seed, which I agree with. But their biggest edge being other teams being not so strong, I think is a weaker argument to make for a team in the playoffs than this team's really good. That I think is where I get a little. But the Rams won it that way last year. Like that's the counter argument is the Rams identified a weak NFC, went all in with who they got, Odell, Von Miller, and they beat a 6 seed in the NFC title game and a 4 seed in the Super Bowl, and that's essentially the path for the Vikings, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and the team they played, the Bengals, is facing the same kind of disrespect that the Vikings get now. Granted, they were a 10-7 team when the playoffs started, but I just feel like if you go down this road of saying, here's what this team should be, they should be better at X, Y, and Z. Ultimately, you've got to be able to say, well, who can really beat them? If you look at what they have, and I think someone pointed out, Jefferson is the best receiver in the game right now. Dalvin Cook is probably a top 3 running back. TJ Hawkinson is a Pro Bowl tight end. They've got some playmakers on defense. They got a lot more than most people in the NFC. A lot more than most teams in the NFL, period. So, again, it's just like I pose the question to you. If you're not taking them in the top 3, who takes their spot?
Well, I think in the NFC, you have to consider the Eagles, the Niners, and the Cowboys as teams that are possibly better than them. Tampa Bay is a very flawed team, but a team where they're sort of turning it around, right? So in my opinion, you're right. Like I think they're in the conversation. Like on any given day, they could beat the Eagles, they could beat the Cowboys, they could beat the Niners, they could beat the Bucks. But I would also say that there's a really good chance that after the dust settles, like those 4 teams could be fundamentally better than the Vikings.
The Kirk Cousins question, and I get, Jeff, what you're talking about with him coming back. I mean, isn't it like every time he wins, there's a video out there about, do you like that? Which to me is almost, and the whole team rallying around him. They're all rallying around him on the plane as he's dancing around with his shirt off. Like, you're not doing that because you think the guy's the man. Okay. You're doing that because I think it does show that there's a camaraderie there, that he's liked, right? Like that they're in it with him, but they're also happy for him. Why are they so happy? Because they know he's really not that great. And so when he does success, it's kind of like giving Johnny a big cheer because he made a poop on the potty for the first time.
Well, I think Eric would confirm this. Those videos weren't happening last year, and they weren't happening the year before that. Like, his popularity and his likability within that locker room incredibly has gone up as his stats have gone down. Because last year he had a pretty good season. Last year he was 32-8, touchdown to interceptions. This year he's not nearly at that level. But I spent some time in Minnesota earlier this year talking to O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, their general manager, about him and about this team. And they were talking about just trying to get him to understand the importance of, we want you to be aggressive. We want you to take chances. If you throw an interception, we still want you to go out there and take chances. And so some of this is kind of like an evolution for him within that team of being able to say, you can make plays for us when we need you to make plays because there's enough around you. Throw that 4th and 18 pass to Justin Jefferson. It'll work. He'll make it work for you.
Or if it's intercepted, you're not gonna there's no. Mike Zimmer hated Kirk Cousins. Ray Charles could see that, and that was the hard thing where, like, I always felt Cousins was like throwing the underneath stuff because he was so worried about throwing an interception because the coach would rip his head off. Kirk's thrown interceptions this year, and some of them have been end of half. Some of them have been, and like, to O'Connell's credit, like, they're just embracing who Cousins is, like, and it's it's an average quarterback, and like, and he's throwing the ball up to Jefferson, to your point, Jeff. Like, Jefferson's really the one that's making that offense go, and like, over time, he's learned to be more aggressive, which has hurt his statistics a little bit, but like, has won them more games.
I love, we had the comment up there about the Vikings offensive line. Dalvin Cook is also back and firing on all
the Vikings cylinders. Interior offensive line is horrendous. Their tackles are good. Their tackles are good. Ed Ingram is the worst draft pick in the 2022 draft.
Really?
Yes. Ed Ingram has like a 1.7 PFF grade or something.
Well, Garrett Bradbury gets shoved around all the time.
Yeah, Garrett Bradbury's a ragdoll. Their interior, but if you look at, like, again, this is the stuff. The difference between O'Connell, who in my opinion should win Coach of the Year, and Zimmer would say, no, you got to be tougher. We're going to run it right behind Garrett Bradbury. If you look at Dalvin Cook's like run chart, he did not run to the in between the guards on Sunday, like, at all. He had no carries in between the guards because the guards are terrible. But he, busted the long one outside. And like, again, like, this is a team like the last Vikings regime. Spielman, Zimmer did not get along, and it started with the Cousins signing, and everything that Zimmer did on the field was to prove that the stuff that Spielman did off the field was wrong, and that's, of course, no way to run a team. At least O'Connell is running things to play to the team's strengths, and when you're a team that goes 8-9 and like all 8 of your 9 losses are by 1 score last year, and you actually like just do that small thing of like trying to play to your team's strengths, that's how you win games.
How much do you take off your value of the Philadelphia Eagles with them falling to the Commanders, Jeff? Is that just, hey, tough divisional game, it happens, or did something get a little bit exposed for the Eagles?
Well, they have a fatal flaw right now with their run defense. Losing Jordan Davis, that big nose tackle they got from Georgia, was significant. That's where they just signed somebody today. Just signed a defensive tackle today.
Joseph.
Yeah, Linval Joseph. Yeah, so they went out and tried to fill that void because that was exposed by the Commanders. They ran the ball 47 times and averaged 3 yards a carry. Like, They were going to, come hell or high water, they were going to die on that hill. I don't think that's enough to really be concerned about the Eagles in that game. I mean, they had 4 turnovers and still had a chance to win that game at the end until that ridiculous, Brandon Graham penalty at the end with the sack, the roughing the passer, whatever it was, unsports personal foul, whatever the call was. And so they had some things happen that happen in the NFL. I mean, you got a guy catching a 50-yard pass, he falls down, gets up, guy hits and the ball splits out. You throw the ball to A.J. Brown, he's got the ball in his hands, DB takes it away from him. I think that ultimately it probably, and I like what Jalen Hurts said about it after the game, which was, hey, it's over. We're not worrying about perfection. We're not worrying about how this went down. We're worried about the next game. And so I never thought they were going to be undefeated. Somebody was going to beat them. The only thing surprising about it was that they've been so good at ball security throughout the season. They had 3 turnovers coming into that game. To have 4 turnovers, to more than double your turnover total in one game is hard to fathom. But I think they've got enough leaders, enough talent to overcome that. So I think they'll be fine moving forward.
I think they'll be fine, but the schedule kind of all of a sudden, just like almost overnight, went from being a cakewalk to getting a little bit salty. Dropping that game to the Commanders at home hurts. And then they turn around at the Colts. I mean, I think they'll make an example of the Colts, but I don't know. I mean,
that's salty.
They were well. I mean, they won. They got to win.
Yeah.
I mean, Saturday we're going to talk about him in a little
bit. At least
bit.
they're starting a real quarterback again. The Colts.
Yes. The Packers. I mean, like the schedule could be cakewalk city, or it could be are the Packers getting
the Packers are the softest team in the NFL. The Eagles are going to absolutely murder the Packers.
Okay, but I'm just they're what are they now? 4-5,
and they're down like what 4 defenders, right?
Yeah, and here are the teams. Titans at home.
Titans are salty. Yep,
always salty, even though they've got plenty of injury questions going on right now as well. At the Giants, I think the Giants are flying higher than they really are. Than their
Giants are going to get beat by Jeff's Lions this week.
At the Bears, who at least know who they are now. They're a wishbone team, and they're playing it that way. At the Cowboys, I mean,
that'll be interesting.
Saints and Giants at home. I mean, there's some games in there. Like to Jeff's point about the Vikings, like if not them, then who? Like that Eagles schedule isn't saying. Like, what would you bring them home? Like, let's take a shot. What's the record of them? What's their record when they're done?
Oh, I'd say 14-3.
Eric?
Yeah, 13-4. Injuries happen, right? Like Hurts style of play. I think Hurts is a great player, but there's possibly we might see Minshew for a game or two just because how he runs and stuff. So and the like you said, like that schedule is not easy.
I am very tempted to say 12-5.
Also, A.J. Brown looked like a little
falling apart, huh?
Didn't he? A.J. Brown looked like he was limping around on Monday, right? And he's not a guy that doesn't get hurt. I'll say that.
Yes, and
that's their best player.
I actually think if I were to put the over under on what their record would be, I'd put it at 12.5 wins. That they're either going to go 12-5 or 13-4. Because I'm going to tell you the other thing that's there, and I talked about it a couple of times. The plus minus on them was completely unsustainable. And they finally had it blow up on them, and they couldn't win without it. I mean, they are Marty Schottenheimer football. Marty is looking down with a tear in his eye, thoroughly enjoying how they play ball, taking care of it. But, like we saw Kansas City be -3 in the takeaway. Philadelphia will not win a game -3.
No.
So
you saw how they played from behind, too. Like they were behind a couple scores and they're still trying to run the ball, and like that's who they are, the identity wise. But you want, like, prior to Monday, they had never trailed in a game in the second half, and like that's the whole thing. Like when we were scouting Lance coming out of North Dakota State, it's like my guy had like 15 pass attempts trailing at NDSU. It's like you don't know what happens when you have to play in a different script, and like that the Eagles are a great from ahead team. But
yes,
we didn't know, we didn't have the data how they would play from behind in the second half.
And I actually give them credit for staying the course and staying who they were in that
Yeah.
game. And if they don't get that penalty, maybe they get a chance to win it and come back and get the victory when it's all said and done. Um, let's stay on the NFC side. Bruce Arians calling out Tom Brady. Jeff, is that too strong a way to describe him saying Tom Brady didn't play well when they were losing, or is that just accurate? Will that somehow motivate the Bucs, or is it not about motivation? It's about that they have lost a lot of talent over the last 2 years and just are not the same team that won the championship.
Well, it's definitely calling out, and it almost makes you wonder all those rumors about their unhappiness with each other. Felt like Bruce Arians was taking a chance to just boom, let me get you before you get back up there and people start loving you up. That I think that I didn't feel like Brady was playing poorly. I felt like he was leading poorly. And so if that's part of his assessment, I would agree with that, because so much of what this team has been over the last couple of years has come down to just a lot like the Chiefs, his mentality. And so when he's been focused and driven, they've looked really good. And this season, he hasn't been that way until the last couple of weeks. I thought the biggest thing Arians said in that interview was that Thomas smiled for the first time this season at practice, which I thought was a great throwaway line, but a very revealing line in that he has not been happy. I'm sure all his personal life stuff, the divorce, and just being old, man. You get old, things change. Things affect you differently. And when you're in a room with a whole bunch of guys who are in their 20s, it's a lot harder to sustain yourself. Football is the ultimate, well, I'll thought the cliche, football is the ultimate team game. But these guys in his locker room have been following his lead from day one. And when he was taking vacations during training camp, and he was going off to his old owner's wedding before, the night before a walkthrough, you're giving your teammates cues about how you feel about the season and how they should feel about it. I think now he's a lot more focused. They're playing better. They're realizing what he needs. I think putting Rachaad White in the backfield, a little more energy from the back. I think Fournette is probably a little bit fried now. Another tight end in the mix, getting him things he likes to have. They're playing better now because they're realizing, one, they need more around him than what they had. But two, he's more engaged.
Is it Tom Brady's taking off, Eric, or is it health? Is it scheme? Is it getting comfortable with the coach? What do you make of Bruce Arians' comments at Brady? Or is it just a grudge match and it has nothing to do with how the Bucs are playing on the field?
It's funny. I just watched this the '93 Oilers documentary for a different reason, and it was funny. It was like that team started 1-4, and then they finished 12-4, and they had all this, this animosity and stuff. And it was like I think it was Cedric Tillman, who's like a really good broadcaster. He's like, at some point we had to realize who we were, and that we had to win that way. And I think with Brady, it's like your run game sucks, right? Leonard Fournette's terrible. You're not doing anything with Leonard Fournette. You got to switch that up. The offensive line. Remember in the one game where he was walking by and he's like, "You guys are too good to play this poorly," and it's like, maybe they're not. Maybe you have to step up and play quarterback, right? Godwin comes back from an ACL, right? Now he's healthy a little bit. Like, you brought in Kyle Rudolph. That dude's barely getting on the field. All this stuff, like, maybe. But at the same time, it's like, this thing's not going kaput. The Falcons stink. The Panthers stink. The Saints stink. You're winning that division. So you're in it for the long haul. And it's like, maybe they just, like, we woke up one day. It's like, okay, like, I'm not retiring midseason, how half these people said I was going to, because this is a team that's going to make the playoffs, and they could make a run, and let's just accept who we are and play. And I think, like, there's a little bit of a freeing nature to that, right? There's looking at the world for what it is oftentimes a freeing experience, rather than looking at it for what you wish it was, which is, I think, how they spent the first part of the season.
Just giving up 31 points to the Green Bay Packers, a team that had really struggled, giving up 138 on the ground to Jones, over 200 yards rushing to the Packers, giving up 3 touchdown passes to Aaron Rodgers, Christian Watson blowing you up. Does that mean that the Dallas Cowboys defense just had a bad day, Jeff, or has been exposed? Whatever, their great success that they were having early on has now been figured out.
Well, a lot like the Eagles, they've got to figure out their run defense. And I was down there last week talking to their players about this defense overall, and they were feeling good about themselves. I mean, they got Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and Trayvon Diggs, a lot of athleticism, a lot of versatility in the room. But yeah, I mean, when you were getting beaten up on the ground and you're giving up those kind of leads, you do have to look yourself in the mirror, because this team is only going as far as that defense takes them. And so, and
Whoa.
What?
So Dak Prescott can't take anyone anywhere. I just want to make sure we're clear about what it is. They're only going as far as the defense takes them.
They're going to be a defense-led championship team if they win a championship. That's. I mean, are you seeing anything differently?
Have you ever heard anything different from me when it comes to the about? And I like Dak Prescott, the guy. I think he might be kind of the anti Kirk Cousins in the sense that I think both of them can hang stats. I think they both struggle to win it at the end, but you pointed out that Cousins has done that more this year.
Wow.
But I think he is a likable guy and a leader. I think he's more Donovan McNabb in the sense that he looks the part a lot more. Guys will circle the wagons around him, but like it's not a shock that they needed the referee to spot the ball. Like he dinks and dunks late, and I mean, I like got, but at the end of the day, no, I think you're absolutely right. If they're going to win, I've felt this way for several years.
Yeah. Well, and he's lost more weapons, right? I mean, they're playing with an offensive supporting cast that Ezekiel Elliott's old and beaten up, and Jerry Jones doesn't want to give up on him. CeeDee Lamb is not a real number one receiver in this league, so he's throwing to a 2 and hoping Noah Brown can be whatever he can be. Dalton Schultz has been banged up. The offensive line has been banged up. They just don't have enough around him. But the larger point, though, is, they got to play better defensively, and they're going to have to dominate people defensively to be able to make some kind of a long run in the postseason.
Real quick, let's try something out here. Eric, you're Brett Beach. First-round draft pick, CeeDee Lamb. Would you give up a first-round draft pick for CeeDee Lamb?
I like CeeDee Lamb a lot. I think CeeDee Lamb's the top.
I do too. I think that was my whole point is to Jeff's. I think CeeDee Lamb with Patrick Mahomes is like 1,600.
Because let's back the truck up a little bit. CeeDee Lamb in the first 5 weeks of last year was one of the, if not the most productive receiver in the entire league. And Dak Prescott, in my opinion, is a terrible injured quarterback. And to your point about Dak, I think when everything is firing, Dak is an amazing quarterback. To me, he's more comparable to Matthew Stafford than he is to Kirk Cousins. I think when you hit on everything with Dak, he can lead the league in yards per attempt, which he did one year. He can lead the league in, they can win 12 games. But like when you get the calf injury, like last year, Dak sucked after he came back from the calf injury. You get the finger injury. Now Dak is like kind of a shell of himself, right? And like, I think that's my worry with Dak is like, we already had the finger injury. We already had the confidence issues. We already had the loss of, Cooper and they've had injuries to Gallup and Schultz and stuff. And like the offensive line and Zeke. And it's like, you just can't perturb Zach. You can't perturb Dak that much.
Can I just
same way you can't perturb Stafford? Stafford's butt this year. Like everything has gone wrong, and Stafford can't overcome that. And I think the same thing is true about Dak.
Can I point out that CeeDee Lamb is on pace for 100 catches, over 1,300 yards?
I know. I bet his overs. I know.
The quietest. Yeah, they wanted Jerry Jeudy. They were trying to get Jerry Jeudy in there before the trade deadline.
And sometimes the sun shines on a dog's ass, and everything's right in the world because CeeDee Lamb's better. he's better. I'll take CeeDee Lamb on my team. He's not Tyreek Hill, but he's.
Is he a 1? You think he's a real number 1?
I mean, I guess I would say. It was 100. Catches.
I have like significant bets on CeeDee Lamb to lead the league in receiving, to be offensive player of the year. I was a big CeeDee Lamb guy, and the moment Dak got hurt, I was like, but think about that. All of his statistics are with Cooper Rush playing 5 games.
Yeah.
Like he's a good football player. Like we're talking about a great receiver.
Yeah, I think if your point is like, okay, dynamic strike anywhere weapon, no. He's a little more move the chainsy than he is dynamic weapon score from anywhere. I'm looking at it. And what were the games that Dak was out?
2
you know,
through 6.
2 through 6, yeah. It's 5 games.
But I don't remember what game was it. Did he go down the second week or?
No, he went down in week 1. Week 1, Lamb, I had his overs betting. He had like 11 targets and 2 catches. Dak was a privilege in that game.
Yeah. 2 for 29, then 7 for 75, 8 for 87, 6 for 97, 5 for 53, 11 for 150 and 2 touches at Green Bay was pretty strong. 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, 16 catches for 227. It looks pretty good. I mean, your point's valid. Like he is not a quick strike. Boy, we got to watch. He's not Jefferson. I would take Jefferson over him. I'd take Tyreek Hill over him. He's not the big play weapon that Deebo Samuel is, but he's a hell of a lot more consistent. Like, yeah, he can play for my team for sure. But I do think your point about the defense overall, though, is right. Like if they're not a wrecking crew, which to me is why I brought her back around to Dak. I think it somewhat defines what Dak is as a quarterback when we say they got to have the defense. Let's talk a little bit about that Miami offense. Is it now the NFL's scariest? Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill going at it. Tua is playing at an MVP level.
You couldn't wait to say that, could you?
No, I couldn't.
Took 46 minutes to get to that one.
He is, I've been a Tua defender.
He's playing really well. He's driving the car well.
Yeah, I mean, like what's that offense. They've got a couple of different backs. Wilson's been effective running the ball. They got a tight end that they gave a bunch of money to that they don't even get to, right? That seemingly would be there at some point if somebody could figure out how to take the wide receivers out of the mix. Jeff, which is scarier, the Dolphins offense or who?
Oh, the Dolphins are scarier right now, and that's no disrespect to the Chiefs, but the Chiefs are being driven by Patrick Mahomes playing at a otherworldly level. If you're just talking, and when I say scary, I'm talking about what they're putting on the field. You're putting that kind of speed on the field on opposite sides of your quarterback. You're talking about a one receiver looking at potentially a 2,000-yard season. Jeffrey Wilson shows up and he's running for 100 yards. Mike Gesicki's a good player. I mean, Tua. I saw some stat. We were talking about the MVP race last night on Red Bull and Gold. We were talking about how Mahomes is running away with it. But in the games Tua's played, he's 18 touchdown passes, 3 picks, 71% completion percentage. I mean, that's pretty damn good. And imagine where they would be if he had played every game.
Number one.
Number
just to add on, don't hold that thought. Number 1 in QBR. He is 82.6 to Patrick Mahomes 78.6, so he's 4 points higher in QBR. And passer rating, which I love the way Eric phrases it. We don't love the stat, but we all understand the scale, so it's at least one to bring up. He's got a 118.4. Second is Geno Smith, 108. Maybe that throws some sand in that Geno is second on that list. Jalen Hurts, 106.4, 106.1 for Patrick Mahomes. I mean, when you're better than Patrick Mahomes in a couple of different measuring categories, you're doing something, right?
Yeah.
That's for you, Eric.
I mean, my issue is, and again, like I'm trying to kind of like level this, like Jimmy Garoppolo has a career yards per pass attempt above 8, right? He's been like, we're talking about an offense that has made Jimmy Garoppolo's passer rating is 100 right now. Like, and I think, so I guess the question becomes, if you trade Patrick Mahomes and Tua Tagovailoa, are we even having this discussion? Like, if they switch teams?
No, I think but I think that's the question was, is which offense is scary?
Oh,
everything is
sure.
not,
so, like throwing out the MVP discussion. No, the Dolphins offense is insane. Like that's a good offense, and it's run really well. The O-line is not playing the greatest, but they protect their O-line pretty well. And obviously, like Jalen Waddle's the 6th overall pick in a draft last year, and Tyreek Hill is worth 5 draft picks. They're both pretty damn good, and the running backs are explosive in Mostert and Wilson. Like, no, I think that they're scary in the same way that the Niners, who the Chiefs beat in Miami for the Super Bowl, are scary, like very scary.
Jeff, are you like me and the Mahomes family thrilled that Eric Eager is here to defend the honor of Patrick Mahomes at every turn, even when it's his honor is not being questioned? It's actually being used as the measuring stick for why somebody's having a great season. Thank God you're there to protect Patrick Mahomes.
Hey, if only Justin Herbert played in Miami, it'd be a much easier go for Justin Herbert with Eric, wouldn't it?
I think, but listen, I do think I love both points because, and this was Jeff's topic. Eric, I think Eric's right. If you traded those two, like, my God, what would Patrick Mahomes be? Like, I think we would all agree the weaponry is better in Miami.
Yeah, that's where he had started his career. That's what it would look like.
Yes. It would. And so to that point, I think it does show that, no, we all do still think Patrick Mahomes is better, even though Tua might be able to steal the MVP away from him. Again, it's a trophy that matters for personal reasons only. It doesn't necessarily mean he's going to win the championship. But I think it's a great question because, my first instinct, and I try to guard against it, but like being a human being, my team that I root for is the Chiefs. And so I immediately want to, you want to fight? Like, how's it not the Chiefs? And then you take a second, you step back and go, all right, well, wait a minute. No, the Dolphins are scarier. Like, if you're a defensive coordinator, you're like, okay, I think, but then it comes down to, and Jeff, you play defense. I know every defensive coordinator I've ever talked to, question one, when you sit down to prep your game plan, is the quarterback a threat to run? Two is not. He is, but he isn't. He will, but not much, because they know he's brittle, right? So he doesn't have the same, what might make this is what I'm getting at, on where maybe it's the Dolphins' weaponry is definitely better. But does Patrick Mahomes' ability to run create more problems? Maybe it's not fear because of how quick Waddle and Tyreek Hill can put you down 14-0. But does the fear of having to try to game plan? Tennessee's game plan was about just trying to keep him in the pocket and then hang on and survive, right? And they couldn't quite do it. It was a brilliant game plan on how they were trying to do it. But does his ability, and not just run, his spatial awareness is second to none. He never, until Andy Reid runs him on an option, or a fluke happens on a quarterback sneak, he never takes a bad hit. He always knows where people are around him. Even his sacks are kind of the ones where they get around him and they eventually just wrap him and don't even take him to the ground half the time. I mean, that is got to be a frustrating as hell thing to deal with if you're a defensive coordinator going up against Mahomes. I don't know. Maybe that does make them, or maybe it's not scarier, but more frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, every defensive coordinator would tell you that quarterbacks who can move are going to be the most problematic thing they face. With the Dolphins, what makes them scary is not just the speed, but the ability to deploy that speed from multiple angles. And so when you have receivers who can carry the football and will carry the football, that creates a different kind of dynamic there. And so, as much as we kind of bemoan Tua's lack of arm strength and ability to stretch the field with his arm, he is pretty accurate. And Tom Brady made a living out of being really accurate. And so he's putting the ball on people in places where they can move. And so while that's not the same thing as being able to scramble around and pick up 12, 15 yards here or there when it's a 3rd and 14, it does make them really hard to defend, because you got two guys who can win off the line of scrimmage immediately. In the NFL, that's worth its weight in gold. I mean, it's what Mahomes talked about that when he lost Tyreek. It's just like he knew whatever happens in this play, number 10 is going to win, and I'm going to be able to go to him at some point.
Can I frame this question maybe back 10 years? Like, who is more scary? I mean, was Tom Brady's Patriots, were they ever the scariest offense? After, let's say 2007 was nuts, but like when they got established in like 14, 15, were they ever like the scariest offense in the league?
No.
Yeah, no.
I think
once Randy Moss was out of the mix, no.
Yeah, like I think that's where they're trending, where like Mahomes, it's more like, look, there's nothing special we have to plan for. To Jeff's point, like we just need to we just need to hope he has a bad day executing, right? Whereas with the Dolphins, it's not like Tua's not like Tua made a really bad pass on a 4th down where the guy's wide open, he skips it to him. It's like and the same thing with Jimmy G. Like Jimmy G is the Ron Burgundy of quarterbacks. The guy throws what's on the teleprompter, and like that gets some interceptions over the middle. But if you watch the Niners, Jimmy G throws the ball to the valuable parts of the field all the time, and he completes them, and that team moves the ball. That's what Tua is doing, and Tua happens to have great wide receivers in addition to that. And so it is, I think the scarier part is that they are doing things that just stretch your defense so weirdly. The Chiefs don't do anything that like stretches you as a defense in any sort of weird way, the same way the Patriots did, same way the Colts did with Dallas Clark and all those guys. It was just like their quarterback just out executes your defense. And that's where Patrick Mahomes is sort of trending in his career, in my opinion.
Can we point out that Tua basically played 25 games in college, 15 one year, 9 the next, because like he's listed in his freshman year of playing 8 games, but in reality that was coming in for mop-up duty. I mean, he only had 77 attempts. We know the big one that he played in was pulling the national championship game out of a hat against Georgia. And then he played 25 games. I mean, I think if there's a lesson about Tua, it's that, like give a guy a chance to play a little, right? Hasn't Josh Allen taught? That's what I kept not getting is Josh Allen was thrown away and brought everybody back. Tua's numbers, and there's no doubt, yes, largely on the part that they keep giving him weapons. That's a moral of a story to all the NFL general managers out there, is to build the weaponry and the offensive line around your quarterback. But 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions doesn't blow in your first year at 22 years old after only 25 college starts. 16-10 doesn't blow, by the way, with a 7-5 record, 6-3 and 7-5 the first 2 years. And to hear the talking heads talk on, on the argument shows, this guy sucks. He sucks, right? And the same people were talking about Zach Wilson knowing how to win now. Bite my ass on him knowing how to win. He's riding the train. And then this year he's blown up 7-1, 18 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I mean, yes, the weaponry's helped him, but the guy never sucked to begin with. Like I would just settle for that. If somebody could say he never sucked, I was too harsh on him. Not you guys, but I mean, others that were always bombing him. I just find that somewhat offensive, to be honest. Jeff Saturday, what do you think, Eric? What's your reaction to him getting the big win against the Raiders?
I mean, the Raiders are a privilege, aren't they? Like, we're talking about a team that they can't fire their coach because they're too cash poor. They have, they were trying to get Gruden out for cause so that they didn't have to pay him the 10 years, $100 million. Derek Carr is like, they go all in on a season where they're 6-1. So like the Raiders, I don't know if that win counts, but I do think when you look at Saturday's game, he went for the right 4th downs. He kept his timeouts. He did some of the right things. So good for him. They played the real quarterback, Matt Ryan. I remember other than wanting to save money in case Ryan got hurt, like it didn't make sense to me to bench him. So I don't know. I think he's going to ruffle some feathers because there are a lot of people in the league that have paid their dues, and Jeff Saturday just jumped the line. So that to me, I think it's just going to be, it's a 1-year experiment. I think they're going to get killed by the Eagles this week, but it was a fun little story on Sunday.
I do love this, Jeff Sunday. That's strong. Look, I'm going to tell you, if he's good, I owe an apology. I think it's bat crap crazy to hire him. And I gave it no shot, none of working. Though if I'm wrong, what I would look at and say, Jeff, right now is too many coaches trying to, like Nathaniel Hackett trying to call his own plays is asinine. He's been buried all year. And maybe Jeff Saturday ends up being a better coach because he can't try to do too much. He can't act like he knows the offense forward and backward. He hadn't been there to know all the nuances. And so maybe you've got a guy, to Eric's point about managing the clock well and good 4th downs, because he's not screwing around doing other things. He's just being an old school coach. When, God, I forget the guy's name. But when the coach of the Giants, and I think he's in the Hall of Fame, had Vince Lombardi as his offensive coordinator and Tom Landry as his defensive
Oh,
he stood there with his arms crossed and let them do their jobs. And that was smart coaching. And maybe Jeff Saturday did a little bit of that, and we need to give some credit. But are you bullish on it being that Jeff Saturday's, and the Colts can get something done, or is it just the Raiders are a fat hot mess?
Well, they are. The Raiders are a hot mess. And Eric forgot to mention how every first-round pick they had in that vaunted class a few years back is now gone.
Which class? All of them.
Yeah.
Every class was terrible.
Yeah. But no, I look, you have to give your hats off to, or take your hat off to Jeff Saturday for getting a win there. And I agree. I think there's something to be said for understanding that if you're just the guy making sure everybody else is doing their job, if you're the guy who is making sure the best quarterback is playing, I had an executive say to me, like, if they just get back to running the football, lean on their offensive line, that could probably do wonders for them. Not a great offensive line anymore, but it's still a big part of what they're built upon. Look, I think they're still going to end up picking in the top 10 in the draft next year. I don't see where they're going to be able to sustain what they did against the Raiders week in and week out, especially in the second half of the season when you're talking about playoff spots being on the line. But Jeff Saturday proved what I already knew about him, which is that he's a smart guy. He's a natural leader. And, maybe he does end up getting a head coaching job out of this down the road. I don't think it's going to be in Indianapolis because there'd be so much heat coming from the minority coaching crowd based off what happened, how this whole hire came about. But I was impressed. I think it's super hard to walk into any place in the NFL in the middle of a season and find a way. It's hard enough to win games anyway. To do it the way he did it is it's almost impossible.
Yeah, it is. Josh McDaniels, there are reports, Eric's kind of referenced it, that the Raiders can't fire him because they don't have the cash. I spoke with people in Vegas. They say more likely is that it's not that they don't have it. Some people pointed out, Mark Davis is building a $15 million house right now. I mean, he's got money, but does he want to be paying off Mike Mayock, John Gruden, fighting a lawsuit with John Gruden? Paying off another, I don't know, he's got somebody else. Oh, I think the other interim coach, I think he even owes money to. It's not about he can't, he doesn't want to, right? But let's ask the question, should he be? Has Josh McDaniels been that? Was this team? I mean, this was a team that was, what were they? Were they 9-8 or 10-7 last year?
10-7.
10-7, and I think went 7-2 in one-score games. Yes. And the yin and yang of things is coming back to haunt them. They're 0-6 in those games this year. Are they really, Eric, that much worse than they were last year? And is Josh McDaniels really deserve to be discussed about being fired in his first year?
Losing 3 games when you had leads of 17 or more, that's rough. Losing to a Colts team that has Jeff freaking Saturday as a head coach, that's rough. Like, the optics of it are worse than what's really true. I mean, Raiders fans, and like they were not fun to interact with this offseason, but like they did not want to hear the fact that if you actually look at points for and points against, that team was a 7-10 team last year. Fundamentally, they got into the playoffs with 4 wins in the last month of the year. One was against Nick Mullins and the Cleveland Browns. One was against Justin Herbert and the Chargers. One was against, the other was against the Colts that had COVID, and they had the weirdest run to the playoffs of any team in the league. No one wanted to talk about that. And, they get Chandler Jones, who's an enigmatic pass rusher. He's done nothing for them. And Devontae Adams has been great, but they lost to other guy like Waller has not been, reliable for them, et cetera, et cetera. It's just not come together. And it was things that, we should have been able to foresee, right. With as far as how hard it is to win in this league.
Yeah. That's, Jeff, the Josh McDaniels, I will say this, well, maybe, it's just kind of the yin and yang of things, and they're just not quite good enough to get it done. When your quarterback's out there, and I know some people have liked what Carr has said, but is that really a positive when your quarterback's out there, making those kind of comments? And do we think that it's against McDaniel?
I don't know. Derek Carr doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would try to, berate his coach either in conscious or unconscious way. But I do agree with what Eric's saying. There's a mix of players there that it's hard to understand why some days you'll get good from these guys and some days will disappear. Like Darren Waller to me, it seems like he's always hurt. As talented as he is, he's never playing football. He's just always standing there with a hoodie on, watching the games. Chandler Jones was a reach. I agree with that too. That at 33, they were hoping to get what Von Miller gave Buffalo, and they got what Carlos Dunlap has given the Chiefs. It's that simple. But I do think there's some strange mojo going on there, and I don't know if Josh McDaniels is the right guy to fix it. Just because I think there's so many. I think one thing I've learned going around the NFL this season, and this is, and McDaniels may have been this guy earlier in his career. There are so many good young coaches who bring energy into the room, who have super creative minds. And I know Josh was known for what he did with Tom Brady and the Patriots. That's also Tom Brady. It's also the Patriots with Bill Belichick. And I look at what Kevin O'Connell has done with the Vikings, what Mike McDaniel's done with Miami, what Brian Daboll's doing. He's not that young, but what he's doing with the Giants. And it's just, you go up and down the list. There's so many young guys out there now. And I just don't think McDaniel is a great head coach. I think he's just a really good offensive coordinator, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think some guys are lieutenants, right? Not everybody's the main guy. I think it will be interesting. Is it just his personality? I love your part, because Bill Belichick will drone on in front of the team, but it's Bill Belichick. When you tap the ring, that'll do a lot of the talking for you. If you don't have that,
Thanos. He's like a Thanos with those rings.
Yeah, you better be more charismatic if you don't have the gauntlet of rings to show around there. All right, let's wrap with this. What are you looking for this week, Eric? Let's start with you. You got a game, a matchup, something that's really got your eye coming into this weekend?
I'm actually super excited for Thursday Night Football for the first time in God knows how long. I tweeted out a picture of some guy with a hazmat suit walking into a building and said, "This is Al Michaels getting the bag to go to Amazon to call Thursday Night Football." Finally, my guy Al gets a good game. I think Tennessee Green Bay is going to be a good game. Tennessee's getting 3. I don't think they should be getting 3. I think they're going to pulverize the Packers. I think the Packers are soft. I think that I think Aaron Rodgers is going through the motions right now, and I think Tennessee is going to thump them.
I like it. Jeff?
I'm going Jets Patriots. If you are the New York Jets and you want to make run a playoff spot, you want to move up the charts in the AFC East, your quarterback has to figure out how to solve Bill Belichick's defense. Zach Wilson has been horrible against them every game he's played. And this is the moment of truth for Zach Wilson. If he can actually help this team reach a playoff spot, he has to go to New England, and we'll find out this week if he can do that.
I got Eagles Colts is just the fact that the Eagles opened at 10-point favorites and are now down to 6.5. That everybody is jumping on the Colts is quite intriguing. So I will be keeping an eye on that. But I'm going to go with an off the radar game. And I know Eric and his big math brain and his analytics will debunk this right away, that it's not 3 points that home field advantage means anymore, right? It's more like 1.8. I think I heard you say
1.5.
1.5. Okay. 1.5 points. But old school people like to talk about it being a field goal. So if it were still that, if you still believe in the old school approach, how is a team that is, I want to make sure I get the number right, 7-2, an even play on a neutral field, if you go by the old standards, against a team that's 3-6? You know what game I'm talking about?
Yeah, Detroit, New York, and Detroit's winning that game outright, Soren.
And so, which I figured, the knee biters might be out. You might be calling for the outright. The Giants, who are everybody's darling, and certainly the city of New York, and most of our national media is based there. Jeff, the NFL Network is based. What has offices there
in LA.
LA. In LA now.
Yeah.
Okay. All in LA. All right, but ESPN is basically New York. And so everybody excited about the Giants. They're a 3-point. They opened at 4 and were bet down to 3 against the Lions. The 3-win Lions and the Dan Campbell, look at my trap show is coming to town.
My
And
man Dan Campbell is 5-3-1 against the spread this year. He is, if you do the math, 16, 10, and 1 since being the coach of the Lions against the spread. My guy covers. They're on a 2-game win streak. They are going to win this game outright, restore the roar.
Okay, there it is. I actually do like the Lions as well. We'll see if it ends up playing out. All right, that's going to do it for us this week. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, SumerSports.com. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, 810WHB.com, where you can hear my show. Our thanks to our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete, our fine sponsors. Anything you need with a parking lot, whether it's just painting the lines on your business's parking lot, or if it's redoing the entire thing, building a brand new parking lot, anything parking, think GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at GANAsphalt.com. Thank you very much for joining us for 2 Deep. Back at it next Wednesday. If you're catching us on the podcast, we stream live Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Central. Thanks so much for joining us here